This is soil from my backyard. The soil came from inside our greenhouse. Half of the greenhouse was not treated with the SuperBoss. The other half was. You will notice on the left the untreated soil. On the right is the SuperBoss soil. Notice how much darker and nutrient-rich the SuperBoss soil is. This picture was taken from our first year of using SuperBoss on our home garden. Look at the results and you will see how it changed the soil. Here is a soil sample that has been treated for 14 years. On the left is the treated soil and the right is the untreated soil. I did a little experiment of my own with how water reacted with this soil. With the treated SuperBoss soil, we found that after applying a few water drops, the water did not immediately sink into the soil. The water drops formed a bond with the soil and then distributed itself along the top before sinking into the ground. After applying water drops a second time, we found that the water drops spread out before sinking. This was different from the regular soil where the water went straight down to the soil and then to the bottom of the planting pot. We found that more water was retained in the soil that was treated with the SuperBoss. This farmer's field was not producing good, so he put 1 gallon of SuperBoss on his field. He now says that it has been outproducing his other alfalfa fields since then. This year he called us back. He had some cowpeas and oats that were not doing so well. His fields were not doing so well either. They tried everything suggested to them from the fertilizer companies. They put on extra iron and even thought that they had lost the field. He called us up and asked if we could save it. We put on some SuperBoss with 1 gallon of 1034O per acre. We originally intended that he applied it in smaller amounts instead of all at once. Just like our meals, it is healthier to eat more small amounts than just a whole lot at once. This alfalfa field didn't produce much either the year before. After applying SuperBoss, it did well. My dad grew some broccoli from our greenhouse. The broccoli was very lush and dark green. The buds were bigger than that found from the store. On the left is the homegrown broccoli, and the right is the store-bought broccoli. Our product SuperBoss was tested on corn at the research farm in Yuma, Colorado. We had 3 subjects, the control and 2 SuperBoss mixtures. The first SuperBoss mixture contains 1 gallon of 517O placed 2 inches down and 2 inches across from the seed. A half gallon of SuperBoss plus 517O was then applied in the rows, altogether containing 1.5 gallons of fertilizer applied. The second SuperBoss mixture contains 1 gallon of 517O placed 2 inches down and 2 inches across from the seed. 1 gallon of SuperBoss plus 517O was then applied in the rows. This comes to a total of 2 gallons of fertilizer. This picture shows the 4 rows of control. Right here you'll see that they had the 2 gallons of SuperBoss mixture, and notice how much taller and how much more lush they are compared to the control rows. Here is just some more photos of the corn fields. In this photograph, the top leaf is the control leaf, and the bottom is the crop that used the 2 gallon SuperBoss mixture. You will notice that the control leaf is much lighter and not so much green compared to the bottom leaf that is a dark, rich green. The SuperBoss leaf is also a little bit whiter than the control. The competitor said to us, "Hey, You need to take a picture of this because of how much difference there was with the control in the SuperBoss crops. Not only did the SuperBoss affect the leaves, but it also affected the root structure. On the left is the SuperBoss and the right is the control plant. Notice how the SuperBoss plant has a thicker stalk. The competitor is the one who pulled the SuperBoss plant, and my granddad pulled the other one. The competitor said to pick one that looked normal, thinking that my granddad would get the smaller one to be cheating, yet my granddad picked the better corn out of the control. In this photograph, notice how much bigger the SuperBoss roots are compared to the control on the right. From left to right, control. 1.5 gallon SuperBoss mixture that was applied with 1 gallon 2 inches down and 2 inches across from the seed. 1/2 gallon applied within the rows. The 2 gallon SuperBoss mixture at the right of the picture, that is 1 gallon, was applied 2 inches down and 2 inches across from the seed. 1 gallon applied within the rows. You will notice the left, control, has less of a filled out corn compared to the longer, fully filled out SuperBoss corn ear on the right. The entire field, including all of the crop samples, were hailed out and were not harvested. This is why we took and picked out some ears to show that even though they were all hailed out, the SuperBoss samples still pulled through. Looking closer at the control, and you will see that it didn't fill out on one side, and it was lacking in nutrients, altogether resulting in smaller corn ears. Looking closer at the 1.5 gallon SuperBoss mixture, and you will see that it is completely filled out with almost straight rows of corn. Looking closer at the 2 gallon SuperBoss mixture, and you will see that it is completely filled out, has larger ears than the others, and has straight compact rows of corn. The corn here has about 40,000 population with the big long ears. This farmer had won first place in the National Corn Growers Association. Also, he placed second, third, and fourth over the years. He won state every year from '97 on. Once he stated using SuperBoss mixed with his fertilizer, he noticed that the fertilizer mixture did so much more than the normal. The SuperBoss had released the nutrients from the soil to the plant more efficiently than previous years. He also had good corn ears when he used SuperBoss. Rodney Monk looked at the corn and became so excited in the third field he looked at. He said that there was over 40,000 population with the big long ears. He wished he had his corn ears like the ones he saw in those fields. Notice how level the fields are. Not only are they heavily populated, but they are level across the top. This is probably one of the biggest telltales. Before SuperBoss, these fields had very poor soil. So poor that you would get your truck stuck trying to drive through. It was very sandy soil that could hardly grow anything. After years of using SuperBoss, these fields had outproduced neighboring fields, and the soil itself has become darker and more nutrient rich. This is really some good corn that probably makes 250 bushels. Some of his fields make 270 to 280 bushels, and then the fields that have been hailed on still average over 200 bushels. These flowers were sprayed with a SuperBoss mixture. They are from the LDS Temple. SuperBoss has been applied on the Denver LDS Temple grounds for 5 years. This picture shows 2 yards. Before SuperBoss was applied, the yards looked identical. On the left is the control. On the right is the yard that had SuperBoss applied to it. This lawn has been applied with SuperBoss for the third time now. We had sprayed some of the SuperBoss on the neighbors because it looked so horrible and almost like it was dying. This is an experiment I conducted with the grass seeds placed in pure sand. The control had a few spots that were not completely filled. The SuperBoss was thick with grass, as you can see in this photograph. Besides the barn being built in the back, there is a story behind this hay. The farmer had called my granddad because his fields were producing very little amounts of hay. Notice how the piles end where the barn is. After applying SuperBoss, he was able to produce more than the previous years. Notice in the very back on the right, the finished barn. Before spraying the field, we had noticed white alkali on the ground. In the first picture, you can see just how yellow it was, and where we came back and checked it 2 to 3 weeks later, it was starting to green up. The farmer had thought he had lost the field because it did not look right, and everything he tried to do did not bring it back, and it did not work. He finally decided to use the SuperBoss because the one alfalfa field he used it on previously did so well. Where it was yellow, my granddad went and looked at the bottom and found that it was indeed green. We knew then that the SuperBoss was taking its effect. He said that he got 2,200 bales, so I think he was pretty happy with it. The control doesn't have the amount of potatoes that the SuperBoss does. These potatoes came from the St. Louis Valley. In 1992, the fields averaged 20 sacks more than the control, and in 95 averaged 40 sacks better with just 2 to 3 gallons of SuperBoss mixture. It always seems to make bigger potatoes that are more uniform, like the commercial sized potatoes that sell for a higher price. Using SuperBoss seemed to produce more cartons and a size of potato that were sold at a higher price. This is a harvester harvesting potatoes. For those that have never seen potatoes being harvested, here is your chance. Potatoes are loaded from the harvester into the semi-truck bed. The semi then drives the potatoes to the storage units where they will be stored. Potatoes are put on the conveyor belts where the leaves and anything that is not a potato is then taken out. These potatoes are then put into big piles that are stored inside the storage units. The plants were heavily loaded with pods ever since the first year SuperBoss was applied. Looking at these pictures, you will see that the pods are indeed heavily loaded. This is sugar beets from last year's test on a research farm. We made 4 tons more on one test and 6 tons more than the control on another. With the one fertilizer mixture we used, it seemed to stun the sugar beets just a little at first. This sugar beet field was at 32 tons back before Roundup Ready sugar beets. They are good sugar beets, let me tell you. Here are some planting pots with tomatoes. One pot was the control, and the other was applied with a mixture of SuperBoss. These tomatoes were really good tasting, and they were just grown out on the patio. Many store-bought tomatoes just do not have that taste that these tomatoes had. With the SuperBoss tomatoes, we had found that there would be probably 3 to 4 tomatoes to each set. Compared with the control, the tomatoes became riper in less time and also were better tasting.